perhaps we can discuss how to spend time in seclusion wisely. And more particularly, how do you find out if you're acting out of distraction? Because distraction and entertainment are not necessarily the same. It seems to me distraction is a much wider category. Movies, music, news can be on the side of entertainment. But it's not that if you refrain from those things that you're automatically not distracting yourself. So how do people who come here, for example, where there's little activity going on outside of some work which is really necessary, or people who live by themselves and have a fair amount of time secluded from other people, how to take advantage of those circumstances?
Right. Well, the first step would obviously be to abandon entertainment. So it is true that distraction is a wider category than entertainment, but you can be very sure that if you're engaging with entertainment, you are distracting yourself. There's no question about that. So to that extent, you have accomplished yourself in non-distraction. If you are able to abandon those things and not depend on them anymore, that is a better position when it comes to your liability to distraction. Now, the problem is that then that category is so much wider then you would have to realize that even things that you think are wholesome actually fall within distraction, even though they're not against the precepts, because distraction is much more than just obvious activities that you know, at the level of external things that you can just stop and just give it up. Your own mind, the momentum of your own mind is by default going towards distraction. So that's why when you would, let's say you've been properly established in the precepts and sense restraint, and then you go into seclusion, what's going to feel easier is to spend all that time engaged in some kind of mental activity. Study, yeah, you would, or you might be rehearsing and bringing up ideas that you read about or heard about, which is not a problem in itself, but we'll get back to it. Or, you know, for some people, they might spend time doing a meditation technique, which is also a distraction. They might then, or if you're not making any effort at all, you just spend time remembering things about the past and planning for the future, or you know, worrying about what other people think about you and what happened today and what's going to happen tomorrow. So you will notice that it's not something that you do because you want it to happen necessarily. You would realize that your mind has its own momentum that prefers distraction, prefers activity. So that's the crucial thing to realize, because then you realize that it won't be a matter of a simple decision to just stop the distraction.
As an external,
because that could become your activity. That could become your thing through which you overlook where your mind actually is. That kind of constant reasserting, no, stop. And then that's why even when people think that they're not thinking, that doesn't at all mean that they're inactive, because you can be suppressing your thoughts, or you will be suppressing your thoughts as an activity, and that's what is distracting you from being aware of what you actually need to be aware of, which is your motivation. Why am I trying to suppress my thoughts, for example? So the first step then, rather than trying to blanket stop all activities, is to start becoming aware of the motivation behind whatever activities remain once the obviously unwholesome activities have been removed. And then that you realize that will be a much more subtle game, if you want to put it that way, of almost like a cat and mouse game, where it won't be necessarily right in your face where the distraction is, where the mind is still kind of leaning in these unwholesome directions, it won't be obvious. But by emphasizing the motivation, by asking yourself, if the mind is thinking about X, instead of automatically seeing a problem with that, you ask yourself, why is it thinking about X? Is it passion? Is it obsessed with something? Is it kind of is it clearly invested in things that are not in my control? And then if you see that, you see, okay, I will stop it because of that, not because the thought in itself is a distraction. And then, through that, basically you won't see distraction as a thing itself, especially not in the beginning. You have to approach it indirectly through like these specific ways that it will manifest. So you could say sensual desire, aversion, laziness, restlessness, doubt, the 5 hindrances. Those will be your distraction. Those will be the pressures that will be taking you away from recognizing the presence of those very pressures. So then that's where you would start undoing it as an indirect thing, rather than just as a choice to not distract yourself. And then you realize, once you remove all these things by not acting out of them, not by trying to suppress them, then you will automatically be non-distracted without you trying to fabricate the non-distraction as a thing that you do, because that will never work. As long as you're putting your point of view and your point of and your volition first, that's the thing that will be distracting you. In other words, it will be constricting the picture and covering up the full scope of what's happening internally.
Yeah, just as boredom, for example, is not something that you can volitionally produce. You cannot say, I'm going to do this and that, and then I'm going to be bored. No. It will arise naturally on account of not doing a whole bunch of other things.
Yep.
But now if that starts to arise, can we conclude that that's necessarily wholesome? Can we say that feeling bored is okay, or is there still some sort of more subtle element of resistance involved?
Yeah, well, it can be a sign of, definitely if you were somebody who was recently quite obviously giving into unwholesome things, then boredom will be a symptom that you are that you have ceased feeding those unwholesome things. So basically it's only revealing you what's already there. It's revealing you the pressure and the momentum of mind that you would have otherwise just continued with. It's so then in that instance, it would be quite important to recognize it's not that the restraint, when you said boredom, like that's exactly what would come up when, for example, somebody who's been not restraining themselves from entertainment, even though they might have been doing relatively well in other regards, the boredom would still come up, because there is some minimal degree of activity of kind of staying in touch with the world that the mind, that an untrained mind would need to feel at ease. So then cutting that off, it's not that it would create, that it's not that it's creating the pain, it's not that it's creating something that wasn't there before. It's just revealing the, you could say, infection or disease of the pressure that was already there the whole time.
And all these previous activities were perhaps motivated by not wanting to feel that, or that original quote-unquote disquiet which was there the whole time.
Yeah. So then that's quite important, because then it would become clear to you that you have no escape from it. You're either acting out of it, making it worse in the meantime, or you stop acting out of it and you start doing something about it. But you can't, because it almost feels like when you distract yourself, like you kind of, like it's not there anymore. The pressure of the boredom feels like. But the fact is, you realize immediately when you stop distracting yourself, oh, it didn't go away, because otherwise how could it get worse?
Yeah, that's the meaning of the distraction. You were distracted from it.
Yeah.
So through distraction, you can never resolve the original problem.
Yeah.
That's the whole point now.
Yeah, and then the more you train that, the more you basically catch yourself being already distracted, because that's how it's going to work. You won't be able to kind of catch the first point. Otherwise, you wouldn't have ended there in the first place.
Yeah.
Then you start to realize, actually, this promise of pleasure that comes from distraction is actually just a trap. It's not really that you're getting what you think you're getting. In other words, you think that you're resolving this internal pressure. Actually, you're not. Which is why, again, like you take anybody who, I don't know, was pressured by boredom, and then they started watching a movie, and then the power goes out in the meantime. Mm-hmm. You will see that the pressure will be worse than, if the power had gone out before.
Yeah, or it turns out to be a really bad movie.
Yeah.
Because then indirectly you'll be automatically reminded that you were distracting yourself, and that intention is painful now.
It will bring you back to like the pressure that you were feeling the whole time.
Yeah.
So then if you become clear about that, you realize, well, I can't escape from this. I can either pretend that it's not there and again keep making it worse, or I can endure this pain, which is there anyway, but then, going the way of restraint gives you actually hope of overcoming that pain altogether. Yeah. Whereas the other way, like, you will have the pain anyway, but there's no chance that you will ever overcome it by giving into distraction. So then that would be the training, as you said, or as we began, for somebody who has been established in the other things, because otherwise all of this is just going to be abstract. And it's not a coincidence that when somebody hasn't developed themselves in the precepts enough and in sense restraint enough, they only feel like they have two options when they're in seclusion. Either distract themselves most commonly with a meditation technique, or their mind is just racing left and right, completely out of control. And there's nothing in between. Precisely because they haven't fulfilled these more basic prerequisites that would allow them to see the choice of distraction on the right level and just refrain from that, instead of trying to overly determine concentration, for example, to like just keep the mind from going there. It's like you don't have to you don't have to play very loud music in order for your shouts not to be heard. You just have to stop shouting.
Stop loud music. Oh, no.
You don't have to play loud music so that other people don't hear you shouting. You just have to stop shouting.
Yeah.
So in the same sense, you don't need to resolve and do focusing or do some kind of mental activity that you think is the practice in order to prevent the unwholesome things. Right, you just have to be aware of where the unwholesome things on the right level and just not engage with it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it just seemed like the way you said it, that shouting is like a choice. Yeah. As opposed to but is it? Because I thought shouting, you tackle the shouting indirectly. Or maybe I actually didn't understand that.
Like it's well, maybe, yeah, it's worth clarifying. It's not that you can stop the momentum of the mind's pressure as a choice, the same way you can stop the shouting.
Yeah.
But either way, it's the same, because you might have the pressure to keep shouting.
I understood. So the meditation technique is the shouting, which you can clearly, okay.
Or that, or might be, for some people it might just be like overly clarifying and revolving around ideas that, if you kind of stop and ask yourself, oh, is this actually purifying my mind from unwholesome states the way that this is to say reflection should, like right reflection should, you realize it's not. It's very often making it worse, winding me up with more doubt and more pressure, which means this can't be what the Buddha meant with, reflecting on the Dhamma that you've heard as a thing that would purify you actually from unwholesome states. So that's something I mentioned before. You'll have to learn the line also, because that's one thing that would be part of the solution, like reflecting, contemplating, reminding yourself of the right themes would be a way to lean your mind away from this default tendency to distract itself. Like, reflect on the danger of this, reflect on all what we just said. Like, the pain is there anyway, it's not actually being resolved. Keep reminding yourself of that every time you feel the pressure to distract yourself, and that is going to contribute to your ability to not give into it. But then the difficulty is, like, you will have to be aware, again, as I said before, your intention. Because if you are clear, okay, I am contemplating the Dhamma because I see my mind leaning in this direction and I'm trying to rein it back in,
yeah.
That's a wholesome reason to contemplate. But then at other times you realize, no, what the mind wants is the clarification, is the thinking, is the revolving around these ideas, and then that becomes your distraction.
It
depending on the motivation behind it.
Yeah, it could be acting out of the hindrance of doubt, for example.
Yeah. So then, that applies to everything, but this is a case that quite illustrates it quite well, how wholesome and unwholesome is not about the things, it's about why are you doing it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So then contemplation is a perfect example, because even the suttas talk about it, and it is the way that you would even develop jhana. In many of the suttas it's described. And yet, if you do it wrongly, if you do it with the wrong motivation, it will be precisely what would be keeping your mind defiled. It will be the gateway for your acting out.
Yes. But now, so to clear up whether there's a difference between motivation and intention, can we say that intention is most generally greed, hatred, delusion, and delusion, right? Or let's say 5 hindrances, because I could be motivated to become enlightened, say, and then start using that motivation to justify all sorts of things. But that should be refined, because that's never going to happen as long as they're still acting out of unwholesome states.
Yeah, but the motivation would be, I guess it's just semantics, but when I say motivation, I don't mean like a rational explanation that you give.
Exactly.
That I'm thinking about the Dhamma because the Buddha said this is good, or some kind of
or
external
in my welfare, other people's welfare,
No.
so it's therefore always right.
It's not about you. It's about motivation. Is about what is making this feel pleasant right now. What is making this feel appealing right now? What is it? And then you'll get to see it's either, like you said, greed, aversion, or delusion, or it could be wisdom and clarity about what actually needs to be done. So then ask yourself, why is this direction of contemplation appealing right now? Is it because I am clear that this will help me steer my mind away from unwholesome states, or increase the wholesome states that are already there? Or is it because it's appealing as a way of like scratching the itch?
Yeah, so appealing cannot be equated with pleasure.
No.
Because to steer away could be very well unpleasant, but then the wisdom, which is the appealing bit, has to supersede that.
Yeah. So then you same as you would have like a unpleasant pill or
medicine
or concoction that you have to drink,
yes.
and it tastes very bitter, but it's appealing because you are quite sure and aware of the fact that this will cure you from the much more unpleasant illness that you're experiencing. So in that sense, it is obviously a very different type of appeal. But initially you won't necessarily see the difference. So you have to ask yourself, why do I want to do this now? Whatever it is, but it applies even to this case as well. And it's important to know that it applies to this case as well, because that's how initially you would come to the practice, inevitably, by thinking about these things, reflecting on them, and that's how you learn, that's how you get the information, that's how you clarify what needs to be done. But then if you never question your motivations for thinking and reflection, doesn't mean you need to stop it, as I said. It means you question your motivation behind it, then you will be limited in how far you will go in discerning wholesome and unwholesome.
And I think even just if you want to, I guess I would be curious to ask, what would be your definition of wisdom, right? Because you just asked, what would be the difference between that motivation, that sort of pushing to get enlightened, as opposed to rightly reflecting on what wisdom itself is, and then kind of finding your way indirectly to what that is. So I guess my question would be is like, what would you define as wisdom?
Well, wisdom would have to be basically the clarity that supersedes even the attempts of the mind to take you in the opposite direction. Because wisdom, like sometimes you will feel inspired, for example. Sometimes you have the push and the inclination to be restrained, to cultivate renunciation and all these things, but none of that is necessarily wisdom, because you can that will come and go. Wisdom is when, even despite the pressure trying to take you in the opposite direction, you're still fully clear, this is where I need to go. So wisdom is when it is able to survive the winds of the defilements.
I actually had a follow up on it, but if you wanted, it might lead down kind of a bit of a tangent to what you were talking about, so I can also wait if you had more to ask on this topic.
No, there's no particular agenda, so we can just we can just explore also what is wisdom, like because as you just mentioned, like, can you actually start from the beginning reflecting on wisdom, or is that by definition going to be problematic? Because there might very well not be, let's say, any wisdom to begin with. So you would have to start by taking on faith the right instructions, which will go against quite deeply rooted intuition. So from going back to the starting point, I would emphasize that, because otherwise you run the risk that you think that you are contemplating wisdom, which has got nothing to do with the wisdom, right?
Well, yeah. Now, just that you mentioned intuition, that's another way of basically you. Oftentimes, wisdom is felt as if it's like this: either you have wisdom or you don't.
A pleasant feeling. I mean, that's how I would say a lot of people think wisdom is. A pleasant feeling.
Yeah,
it's like, well, I figured it out.
No, but
sorry.
That's. I mean, it can't feel that way. But what you need to be aware of is what I said just before. Like, when it feels appealing go in these directions.
I mean the wrong wisdom, just to be clear. Not the right wisdom.
Yeah, of course.
Right,
but then when it feels appealing to go in a certain direction, when certain ideas feel like they make a lot of sense, if that's because you're inspired, and then when that inspiration goes away, then it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't kind of feel right anymore. That's when it's not wisdom. That's when it's just exactly circumstantial inspiration.
I think that's what. So the question I guess I was trying to ask was that wisdom, at least the way I would define it, is seeing what you thought. How did I say it? Essentially, like, there's scaffolding. There's something that was always there in your experience that you just didn't recognize it as such. And seeing that there as something that you did not question, and therefore you can unburden yourself with it. That's what I would define as wisdom. And naturally, the way one gets to that, initially you have to take on effort. So you take on the precept, you take on sense restraint, you do these things. But once you're sufficiently established in it, you have to sort of
undo.
Yeah, exactly. Like sort of. Yeah, I mean, like these days, I kind of really see it as more like, I don't know, like more physics as opposed to like designations, right? Like you sort of, like you sort of feel that you're pushing forward, and like the Buddha said, I crossed the shore by neither pushing forward nor standing still. And it's about like you just find yourself a little bit too forward than you need to be to then kind of uncover that wisdom, so to speak.
So which way?
Well, no, wisdom would be what would allow you to recognize when you're going the wrong direction.
Oh, okay. But then what would you call the moment, let's say, that you recognize something that wasn't questioned? So, you know, you're sufficiently established. There isn't a pressure there. Now you decide to contemplate something that you haven't contemplated for a while. You're like, oh crap, that's something I took for granted. What would you call that?
Well, the wisdom would be the thing that would guide you to recognize those things in the first place. It's not that they come spontaneously.
No, of course. I mean, you, like I said, once the ground is fertile, so to speak.
Well, that ground being fertile is what the wisdom is.
That's what you would call wisdom.
Yeah. Not like the specific instances of recognizing things, because anybody can have instances and then later on they would, through bad choices and bad habits, they would lose the clarity that they had before. And you would see that many times. Like somebody might even write you an essay that, you know, sounds like they were going the right direction, which means like, oh yeah, they were coming up with these right ideas, but then because that ground, the actual ground, was not fully fertile, eventually they fall from whatever it is that inspiration might have been one of them, or, you know, whatever was getting them to keep the precepts and maintain that ground. They fall from it, and then even those ideas that they had before that felt like, oh, I should explore this, and this is that, and it might have even brought a sense of clarity and release. It doesn't anymore. Right.
But what would you call the designation for someone who is like is or is it not even worth emphasizing in any way, that kind of I mean, again, like I'm saying, it's you sort of, at some point you need to start, once you're established, I would assume you need to start seeing things at a more subtle level.
Yeah, but what do you mean by established? Like established in what?
Precepts and sense restraint.
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, perhaps you should emphasize, when you talk about fertile ground, this means that without virtue and restraint, there's not going to be any wisdom. Yeah. That's the first thing, right?
Yep.
So when you say being established, I presume you mean established in that.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
Good. So now someone is established in that, and you're now trying to find out, where does the wisdom come in? Does it automatically follow from the virtue and the restraint? Like, do virtue and restraint automatically reveal to you those things that were already there? Because that's what you were touching upon now earlier.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I'm asking kind of because we already got a definition of wisdom, which is that the recognition of your where you are in your situation, right? Would that be fair to say? Fair to summarize?
Depends what you mean situation. You could basically say wisdom is when you're able to recognize, the important wisdom is when you're able to recognize the state of your mind.
Right.
Mind affected with passion, mind not affected with passion, mind affected with aversion, mind not affected with aversion.
Because that's what lasts. That's what can't be taken away, even if you, I mean, sure, you can be
even if the mind then, you know, when the mind is not passionate, when the mind is not averse, things can be clear because of that, because the clouds are not there anymore. And naturally you would have more clarity, but if the clouds come back, you lose the clarity, which means
it wasn't wisdom to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're here, and again, maybe it's too technical of a question, but I was just curious, what would you call the designation once you have developed that fertile ground, and now you decide, contemplate space, the phenomenon of space, and you recognize stuff that was already there that you didn't necessarily see through the lens of space, and it's like a aha moment, let's say. What would you, if that's not wisdom? Because I mean, obviously that
I definitely wouldn't call that wisdom, because
you could call it insight.
Because if you could call it wisdom, you know, the more an arhat is somebody who has fully developed wisdom, and they would be completely free from aha moments, because there's nothing that they haven't understood.
Exactly.
So then you couldn't associate that with wisdom, because, you know, it would be actually inversely proportional. The more wisdom you had, the less you would realize that you didn't
Sure.
understand.
Okay. I mean, like, yeah. So maybe what I meant is that. So the you don't want to go down the road of like the more aha moments I'm having, the better it is. Not necessarily. But that aha moment does lead to more dispassion, because something that you were inherently overlooking and had some sense of burden is seen as something that's not yours, as was there from the beginning. So that's what that aha moment would lead you down, is dispassion.
Yeah,
it's not something you can
yeah,
know.
but if you qualify it like that, because there might also be people practicing all sorts of focusing methods and techniques which can give rise to all sorts of aha moments then not necessarily lead to the dispassion.
Yeah, but still, the wisdom would be more on the level of that even when that happens, when you you recognize things that you didn't see before, you don't be compassionate in regard to that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So that is the only wisdom that you would have to be concerned about, because, as the Buddha even said, knowledge and vision, the holy life is not lived for the sake of knowledge and vision. There's that whole sutta where he talks about the hardwood, and then he says, some people developing samadhi, they would achieve knowledge and vision, and then they would become satisfied with that. And then he says, even that is not the goal of the practice. So the goal is not even to understand the quote-unquote right things. He said the goal is extinguishment through non-assumption or non-clinging.
Okay.
So then, even when somebody would get the right insights, quote-unquote, the actual nibbana is whether they're able to remain dispassionate in regard to that.
Yes. So that means that if somebody gets Alzheimer and doesn't remember any of their aha moments anymore, doesn't mean that their wisdom is gone.
Exactly.
Which also raises the question, is the wisdom on the side of you, or is the wisdom on the side of Chitta understanding things for itself now? Because that is also how you can distinguish between what you mentioned earlier, like neither leaning forward nor standing still and so on. Yeah, that because those would be attitudes that you would have in relation to taming or training the mind. But can we also say that when the mind actually sees rightly for itself how to not suffer, that is where wisdom begins? That the wisdom in a sense has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, but even before we go that route, I just realized, so what you just said, you could basically just say those are dhammas, those are images that arise.
Regarding what?
When something becomes clear, when something that you were overlooking before, it becomes clear, that happens that is one of the symptoms of the obstructions being removed, or being lessened at least. But that in of itself is just an image.
No,
and
sure.
then the actual wisdom and dispassion would be in relation to that.
Exactly. So the way I would sort of continue with what would happen is like you would have this aha moment, and what that should reveal to you is ironically more pressure. Like you sort of need to let the dust settle. So you have an aha moment. It's like, oh, I didn't look in this direction. And I was holding on to all this stuff. And now you need to like continue that sense restraint, but now you have a tune that was kind of invisible to you, if that makes sense.
Right. But then, I mean, if it is happening on the right level, that you're becoming aware of your passion in regard to things, then yeah, you could say those are moments where you can reasonably assume that your wisdom has been developing. But it's not that the wisdom has anything again, the more wisdom you had, the more impossible it would be for you to overlook anything. The more impossible it would be for there to feel like there's anything new or anything unexplored. So the wisdom would be the perpetual clarity that prevents you from holding on to things in the first place.
Yeah.
And that that type of wisdom has to be permanent. It cannot be something that comes and goes.
For sure. And I mean, as long as you still suffer, you still know that you need more wisdom.
Yeah. So you wouldn't measure it at all by anything that that just happens in a specific moment. Wisdom is an irreversible, at least, well, from the point of right view onwards, wisdom is irreversible.
But then let me ask it this way. Is there a way to wisdom without some level of aha moments?
No.
Okay.
But even then, the aha moments have to be the right
have to come
level.
second. Well, yeah, they have to come second to the actual dispassion.
Yeah, and the aha moments, what the aha is about should always be, oh, I was passionate in regard to this and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Never like that some new thing pops up,
figured out something.
and then you figure something out.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, so then technically, aha moment is only really worth it if it allows you to become further dispassionate towards stuff that you didn't realize you were passionate towards.
Well, no, I mean, even more accurately, if the aha moment is about dispassion. If you become aware of like, oh, I was overlooking my passion in regard to this, now I'm not overlooking it anymore.
Right, but so you're saying that it doesn't necessarily need to have like a dust settling time, if you understand what I mean by that. Like, you know, you can have like a just maybe describe a situation. You have a neutral feeling that there's no really pressure to go anywhere, and now you decide to like, well, let me like see what else is there, and then you'll have an aha moment, and that aha moment now reveals to you a bunch of pressure that was there. Does that necessarily need to be the case? If you follow me.
Yeah, well, like, even those kind of revelations would be temporary, would be ephemeral. Because if you,
well, of course, I mean, temporary in a good way, because, I mean, that stuff you don't want in your experience anyway.
Yeah, but like, all of those realizations would be basically what anybody, even without right view, they would be realizing, like, that's how you would purify your mind from the 5 hindrances. But then, as that sutta says, if somebody would think that, oh, because they've been able to purify these things, that these things will never come back, it would be the same as saying, like, when it rains and the dust settles on the road, that, oh, this dust will never come back. So those are the things, that developments that you would have through the graduate training, that like you start recognizing, oh yeah, there's this pressure that I've been overlooking. You don't overlook it anymore. Like, that's exactly how you would develop samadhi, even without the right view. But then the actual right view is not about that. The actual right view is independent of all those aha moments and that kind of perspective that expands and contracts over time. Right. It's completely independent of that. It has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And I guess that's why I hope we're using the designation aha as opposed to anything more specific, because if it becomes anything more specific, that you've figured out space and now you don't need to worry about space ever again.
Yeah, no, but even then, like, if it's a realization of, oh, I was acting out of sensual desire, I was acting out of aversion, all that is just the 5 hindrances. So anybody would have that. It doesn't have anything explicitly to do with the right view. It's the basis for the right view. To recognize, your own acting out of hindrances, because that's the only way you can overcome them. And yeah, it's not about, like, the thing about space and all that, that's like not even samadhi.
Okay,
that's nothing.
Yeah, gotcha. So
then, the aha moments, even that is not necessarily part of the Buddha's teaching. Like it's when, independently of the state of your mind, independently of what has moved, what has changed, what has come up, what has gone away, you realize, am I, like, full on the most fundamental level, am I passionate? Am I dispassionate?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that statement. Of course, one could say that actual Sottapati is like it would also be an aha moment of sorts, right? To kind of, well, see that there's no outside of this.
Well, no, even that would be part of just developing samadhi. Like, your mind cannot be composed if you still conceive of an outside. That's a whole definition of the mind being scattered.
Of one-pointedness, which is the opposite of focusing on one particular thing in the midst of other things, you
Yeah.
go in the opposite direction. So you have this this
picture.
wholeness,
Yeah.
totality. Let's put it like that.
So that's exactly why samadhi would be the basis for developing the right view. Because then it becomes clear that there is no outside.
So then what would you... Okay, so if I understand you correctly then, so if the aha moments aren't part of the Buddhist teaching, what would you then describe the right view as?
Well, so that any phenomenon, no matter how subtle it is, can kind of excite you to the point where you overlook your attitude in regard to it.
And you wouldn't arrive at that?
Through aha moments, no.
Uh-huh.
It would be...
You wouldn't?
You wouldn't arrive at that through aha moments. Because the aha moments will be things that excite you in such a way that you overlook your attitude in regard to them. Like that's all these ascetics that would in the Buddhist teaching would say, like, you know, developing the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, the base of nothingness. That would be like, oh wow, there's this whole plane of existence basically that you were completely unaware of. All these defilements that were holding you back from being established in this domain, like passion towards the lower domain, same as with the 5 hindrances, you kind of catch yourself leaning towards some sensual object, and it felt like it was completely automatic, completely moving on its own momentum, and you realize, oh wait, I'm actually doing this. This is optional. I don't have to continue this momentum. And then you don't give into that. That's a basic realization that that is what samadhi is, basically. So that's why it says there is no samadhi for somebody who, like, you cannot separate seeing through things, as it's called vipassana, and samatha, because you will be recognizing things if your mind is actually getting composed.
I see.
But then
in the Buddhist teaching, how does the Buddhist teaching fit into this?
In the Buddhist teaching, it's like, well, in regard to all of that, in regard to any phenomenon, high or low, inferior or superior, subtle or sublime, that it's still, you don't overlook the fact that you are passionate in regard to it or not. So that's why there was that sutta where, well, the first sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha says, somebody conceives Nibbana, conceives in Nibbana, conceives from Nibbana, says Nibbana is mine. He delights in it. And it's because, you know, it might be, let's say, aha moment, to continue using that designation, of like virtually the right direction of where this passion is, but because they overlook that they are passionate in regard to this discovery, quote unquote, because of that, it's not Nibbana.
So then, and I guess the post-right view, could you then just kind of develop more or less the same practice that the people who attain neither perception or no perception, that, you know, the practice that would lead them to that? So anything that kind of gets them...
delivery. Yeah, it's a delivery.
Oh, I'll go.
Yeah. Well, from here it looks like the guy drove off.
Yeah.
So you were saying whether after the right view,
after the right view,
somebody would be able to still develop those same things. Well, yes, but it would be completely different in its nature, because then the whole thing is coming through the angle of the right dispassion.
I see.
And there are no kind of blind spots in regard to it. Which is why it would take very little for, like, it would be automatic, really, that somebody who actually has the right view, if they were to develop these things, they would automatically become an arhat. They wouldn't have to go through like questioning, where is my blind spot in regard to this? It would be obvious, because they have understood that principle, like, well, it doesn't matter how high, low, how subtle, how kind of enlightening it is. It doesn't matter. What matters is what is my attitude in regard to it. And then that cannot become forgotten, no matter how far they travel in the direction of jhanas and samadhi and all this.
And actually, so just to sort of, because I can't really understand, like how this works.
Right.
Because you have these designations, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if you're at neither perception nor non-perception, obviously you're not holding on to the designation of the practice that got you there, because it seems rather
You may not
coarse.
even know about it. No.
So your holding on to isn't even at the level of designations.
Well, designations are not like the labels that you speak about.
Yeah.
Designations are much more subtle.
I see. Okay, so but it's just kind of but how have they gone to that direction?
Well, that's actually one thing that's important to understand. All these names that you read in the suttas, those are names that that are developed so that you can talk about these things. But somebody who is training themselves, they wouldn't even need to know about these names. That's why you have that sutta where like a monk is established in, I don't know, the first jhana, and then he asks, okay, so is there further than this? And then without it being told in advance that there is the second jhana, they continue striving and they arrive at the second one.
I see.
But they may not even have the name.
So it could even just be complacency, that they've reached that plane of neither perception nor no perception, and they just
of course
that,
it's not that like they knew that you have all of these 8 and you decide to like, I'll just stay here. No, it's like you have developed precisely what you said. Like you see yourself. That is the only way that you would develop these things. Is like you see your defilements, you notice them, you abandon them, you're able to move on to the next one. It's you cannot develop it through like doing something else that completely overlooks the place where the pressures are. It has to be developed through abandoning the 5 hindrances. That is the only way that you can achieve any of these states. So that's why it's not a huge jump when these people were thinking that they were arhats. It's not that they were like super far off the mark and they were just kind of almost like a cartoonish, conceited, just blind nonsense. No, it was like they have actually been working on that right level of noticing greed, aversion, and delusion, not acting out of it until it actually goes away. And the result of that is the mind ascending into these more subtle and subtle planes. So, yes, with the right view, you have to develop these things, but it would come from a completely different place. You wouldn't be able to develop any kind of how would you call it? Like, losing perspective, making something special out of them, becoming kind of dependent on them, overlooking that. Well, no matter how lofty and no matter how even like those planes are more, you could even say they're more fundamental than the other stuff, the normal state of being that you live in. Even then, you wouldn't be able to become dependent on those and overlook that, wait a second, it doesn't matter in which of these my mind is. That is not what the point of this whole training is. The point is that other perpendicular dimension of like, what is my attitude in regard to this? So in a way it's the same thing that you would have used to develop samadhi. It's like asking yourself where your motivations are and all that stuff.
Purification.
But then, whether you apply it then to the result of that practice or not, that's a different question, and most people don't. Because it feels, without a Buddha you wouldn't, because it feels like this is it. Like it's been purified from everything, and then only from the outside, somebody from the outside tells you like, wait, no, this is not quite it. Because when you're talking about it and you're saying, oh, your attitude in regard to it, it sounds like this obvious thing, like that only a fool would overlook. But no,